We are just over a week away from the start of the BYU football season, and I had a chance to sit down and put together a preseason depth chart for you. I'll say this about my depth chart projections. I believe between now and the start of the BYU football season on August 31st, there's going to be a lot of change.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen and or view of the day. Appreciate all of you who like to call everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, all summer long, they're hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. You heard that right. There's something for everybody all summer long, every single day. Visit FanDuel.com to learn more right now. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And I'm getting it back to a question that Taylor from our Locked On Cougars Insider Group asked me to address last week. He said, can you project what BYU's offense and defense is going to look like going in to training camp? Well, I sat down, I put together a little bit of a depth chart, and this is what I came up with. We'll start off with BYU on offense. And the bigger thing for BYU offensively, to me, is that the Cougars have a lot of questions on this offense, and for good reason. Remember, the quarterback position has been dominating the headlines all offseason long. So I'm going to share this screen with you guys, and I'll get out of the way here if you're watching this on YouTube, but I'll make sure to lay it out for those of you listening in an audio format. I am still projecting QB1 for BYU this season to be Jake Retzlaff. Now, as I mentioned in the open, there could be a lot of change for this BYU roster, and I think this quarterback position is chief among them. If Gerry Bohanon comes into training camp and proves that he is capable of being the field general that BYU needs him to be, would not surprise me to see him overtake Jake Retzlaff. But going into training camp, I am projecting Jake Retzlaff as QB1, but I'm saying it's kind of a 1A and 1B scenario right now because Gerry Bohanon will have his opportunity to chase down Jake Retzlaff. That obviously brings up a conversation. Could any of the other quarterbacks get in the mix? That is something that I am not so keen on. I don't think that Trayson Bourget, McKay Hillstead, Noah Lugo, on down the list, I just don't see any of them having enough of a runway in training camp to be able to step up and take that job away. But it was a good question also that was submitted over the weekend by Andy about this. Whose arm would you put more trust in a clutch moment right now? Well, Andy, I can't answer that question adequately because Gerry Bohanon told us after spring ball that he had not been able to really go out there and absolutely rip it because his shoulder just was continuing to rehab throughout spring. I have been hearing that he's finally back to full health. So if he is truly back to full strength with the BYU football program, I think early on in training camp we'll learn a lot. But right now, if you were to say put the game on the line, you have to trust in one guy's arm. I'm still going to ride with Jake Retzlaff. That's just where I'm going to stand right now. Now, at running back, I'm projecting LJ Martin still to be the starting running back. He said on this very podcast last week that he's not sure where the rumors came from due to his health status. Whatever time, if any, that LJ Martin misses, whenever he's back on the field for BYU, he is RB1. He is the top back. He's BYU's bell cow running back, and he will be the lead guy for the Cougars if he is healthy this season. I am projecting, just based on the conversations I've heard from people, I heard guys like Keelan Marion on the Wise Guys podcast say that Folau or Hinckley Ropati is RB1 right now. I am thinking that Hinckley is back with a vengeance after that knee injury that he suffered in training camp last year, and he wants to make his final season in a Cougar uniform as memorable as possible. But I'll also say this, Miles Davis, he is not going to go down lightly. So it might be an or situation with that backup running back position. And if LJ Martin does miss time, expect to see a heavy dose of Hinckley Ropati as well as Miles Davis. But also don't forget about the name Pokai Haunga. That's a young man who's got a lot of talent, and it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. At wide receiver, I'm projecting the top three to be Chase Roberts, Darius Lassiter, and Cody Epps, simply for the fact that they play different styles of football. I look at them as being the top guys, but you're going to see Keelan Marion, JoJo Phillips, and Parker Kingston, who I list here as the backups to those two on this two deep. If you're watching this on YouTube, I project those six are going to play a lot of football this fall. Does that mean that Cody Hagan or a guy like Dominique McKenzie can't get in the mix? No, they absolutely could get in the mix, and that is going to make for an exciting rotation. I believe that wide receiver position is projecting and will be BYU's deepest position group this season. I think they've got a lot of talent, and it's a lot of it ready to really erupt this year if they get steady quarterback play. I've said it a lot on this podcast all spring and summer long, that if BYU can find a quarterback that can adequately distribute the ball to the playmakers out there, and particularly these wide receivers, that's going to give BYU a major opportunity to have an uptick offensively. So keep an eye on that going into training camp. There's a good chance that they're 8 guys deep at wide receiver, and that's a good problem to have if you're BYU. The tight end position, similar circumstance. I'm actually projecting 2 newcomers to be my top 2 tight ends. Keanu Hill, who played wide receiver for BYU the past 4 years in a Cougar uniform, is going to play tight end for his final season. He's bulked up to 240, 245 pounds, and he looks the part of, I think, a true tight end that BYU will utilize heavily in the passing attack. I think that Reiner Swanson came in with a college-ready body. He was one of the revelations of spring camp, and anybody who saw Reiner coming out of high school saw a very polished football player. If you look at his highlight reel, he was a very, very capable guy. And I think those will be your top 2 guys, but don't discount Mata'ava Ta'ase, Ray Paulo, Jackson Bowers. There's going to be a lot of tight ends. They're going to be looking for playing time, and Kevin Gilbride's job is to make sure that he has as many guys that are capable of contributing as possible. Will all of them get the reps that they crave? Probably not, but that is a good problem to have. You want to have guys fighting tooth and nail to get time on the field. And if you can create that environment of competitiveness where it's not toxic, you're not having guys tear each other down, but you're giving them the opportunity to go out there and prove themselves every single day. And if they contribute to meaningful winning football, that's a great thing to have. Let's roll down here and get to the offensive line for a moment before we move along to the defense. I'm projecting at left tackle, Caleb Etienne to get the start at left tackle. He has really transformed his body. He was doing that in spring ball. We talked with him during spring camp, and you can tell he's very motivated to get it right this year. I believe his backups will be a battle between Isaiah Jota, the transfer in from Colorado, or Trevin Osler, who's been in the program for a few seasons now. I think those two will go at it, and don't discount Isaiah Jota. If he comes in and blows up in training camp, he could earn himself a starting job. He's got that type of skill set. The biggest question mark is, can he prove that early on in training camp and surpass a guy like Caleb Etienne? At left guard, I have Waylon Lapua hold down his job that he had last year. Outside of the fact that he got injured midway through the season, he was a rock at left guard for BYU. He's done some cross training at right guard, and there's the capability, if BYU feels like they need to move him over, he can do that. But I'm projecting him right now to be your left guard with Sonny Makassini as his backup. Connor Pay, our good friend here on the podcast, he's the stud. He is the captain. He's going to lead this offensive line from that pivot or center position. I believe his backup right now will be Sam Daw, who is actually one of the strongest guys in the entire program. And that's a really, really cool thing to see. He's a walk-on who transferred in from Idaho State with no guarantee of even being on the roster. He's proven himself. I think Sam has got a capability, if anything happens to Connor, of stepping up there. Austin Leausa, the transfer from Southern Utah University, I project him to be your starting right guard this season. But don't forget the name Joe Brown. I know that Joe has gotten all kinds of plaudits from people around this program. Considering he's coming home off of a mission, I'm going to start him out as the backup right guard right now, but it would not surprise me if he is really everything he has been touted to be. He ends up as a starter by mid-season, if not next season by the very latest. He has got that type of skill set. He's going to be an interior offensive lineman, and he could play center or guard, so any of those 3 interior spots, but don't forget the name Joe Brown for the foreseeable future. He has got all kinds of talent in him. And then at right tackle, I've got Braden Keim returning to his position that he held down last year, with Jake Eichhorn holding down as the backup at that position. And I think that offensive line, with those 10 or 11 guys, and not even counting guys like Weston Jones in that mix, there's a lot of talent from that offensive line unit. The biggest thing for TJ Woods is to get it playing on the same page. There was too often, you guys know this who watched BYU football last year, way too often, this was a position group that failed spectacularly. You'd have 3 or 4 guys do everything they were supposed to do on a play. One guy would do something completely opposite, and it would just scuttle everything BYU tried to do offensively. TJ Woods has got to get these guys, all 5 of them, working in sync, and I think that alone, if you can get all 5 guys doing what they're supposed to do on every play, okay, let's give them as many plays as possible. Let's say 98, 99% of those plays. That alone, I think, could help BYU's offensive output by significant degrees. But that obviously has to come in time, and training camp is the time to get that work done for these players. All right, so coming up next, we're going to transition over to the defense. I think that Jay Hill's transformation of this BYU defense is already rolling. I think it's going to yield some good things this year, but there's still some question marks I have about the interior of that defensive line that I think could hurt BYU, at least early on in the season. We'll delve into that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys all summer long. No matter if you're a sports junkie or not, they've got the options for you guys. If you want to believe that BYU football, we're talking about this depth chart, they can go over or under 4.5 wins. Well, FanDuel's taking those bets right now. If you want to think that BYU basketball in the first year of the Kevin Young era, with all the talent he's assembled, can surpass those 55-1 odds to win it all in March, take advantage of it now. Go to FanDuel.com and place those bets. The best part is all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head over to FanDuel.com once again and start making the most out of your summer once again. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, please check out our friends over the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It is available on YouTube or also on the Amazon Free Fire TV channels app. It is your one-stop shop for all of the sports news you guys need to know every single day, and it's streaming 24/7 with all the latest stories, all the biggest news. No matter what you're into, they got coverage of the national leagues, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. They got it all for you guys. So once again, it's Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, and check that out right now. It's all courtesy of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's talk about BYU's defense. I'm going to share this screen once again and throw it over to the defense so you guys can see what I'm projecting for the Cougars on D. But the number one thing I want to get across to you guys is that the Jay Hill transformation of BYU's defense, it's not done yet, but I believe it's on its way. So given adequate time, I think that Jay Hill will have this unit competing at a higher level this season than they were competing at last year. Will that yield better results on the field? Well, that's what you hope, obviously, because I think BYU's hopes of having a better season than a year ago, a lot of it rides on this defense being able to hold up, in particular, against the run much better than they did last year. Remember, last year, there were many games that BYU's interior, their defensive line, got absolutely mauled at the point of attack and just could not hold up consistently against some of the other rushing attacks in the Big 12. The good or bad news, depending on how you look at it, is that those rushing attacks from the Big 12 only got better. And that is a concern if you're a Cougar fan, because you want to be able to trust that they're going to be able to compete at a higher level. And Jay Hill will demand that of them. A lot of these guys have spent a lot of time in the weight room trying to get their bodies right. And I project that the BYU defensive line, at least the starters, I think are capable of holding up. The question I've got is those backups. Do they have the adequate depth? And that's been a bugaboo for the BYU football program for some time now, is making sure they have quality depth. So defensive end, you're going to have Tyler Batty back. He's being projected as a potential first-team All-Big 12 honoree. He has all the capability in the world of being an absolute stud for BYU, and I hope that he realizes his potential this year. He needs to have some of his teammates step up and take the pressure off of him because he's faced a number of double teams in his time. That goes to a guy like John Nelson and David Lott, who I'm projecting to be your starting defensive tackle tandem. When Danny Saili left the BYU football program for spring camp, I was like, geez, they're going to be really thin on that defensive tackle front. But I think if you have guys like John Taumoepeau and Blake Mangelson, who is bulked up and is ready to move inside like John Nelson, I think you're going to actually be better off overall depth-wise, defensive tackle-wise, because of the experience factor. Blake Mangelson's played a lot of football for BYU. He knows how to hold up in terms of rushing attack, and the fact that he's got some extra bulk to him, and he's now playing on the inside, I think that could lend itself to BYU being a little stiffer at the point of attack on the interior, but it's got to start and end with John Nelson and David Latu. They have got to be the two rocks in the middle of this defensive line. They're not guys that you're going to write home about being like, okay, those are all conference honoree type guys, but they've got to be better this season if BYU has hopes of being a better defense. Opposite of Tyler Badley, I'm still projecting Isaiah Banya to reprise his role as that rush end for BYU. But those backup defensive end roles, I've got Logan Latui backing up Tyler Batty, and then I got Bodie Schoonover backing up Banya. But keep an eye on the name of Ephraim Asiata. Ephraim is going to be a guy who's going to be a specialty player this year. He's probably going to play a lot of the third down and long situations when you just need to pin your ears back and get after the quarterback. Keep an eye on Ephraim. He is a violent football player, and I think that he has got the capability of contributing in that small facet, at least early on in his BYU career. And anything you get beyond that, that's gravy. But keep an eye on his name. Now, moving back to the linebacker group, I think that it's getting out at this point, but Siale Esera, who suffered a foot injury at the tail end of last year, there was some question if he was going to be healthy enough to compete this year. Everything I'm hearing is he's on track to be back on the field when BYU kicks off training camp, and that's a solid thing because Siale is an incredible linebacker. He, in his short time playing for BYU last year, I was absolutely ecstatic watching what he was capable of as a true freshman. So keep an eye on him. I'm projecting him as the Sam or strong side linebacker for BYU in this defense, and don't get caught up in these names because they are very fluid. I'm also projecting Sione Moa to be his backup. I think that Isaiah Moa, who is going to move back to linebacker this summer/fall for BYU, could team with his brother Sione as the backups to Siale. So keep an eye on that at strong side linebacker. Middle linebacker, all fingers crossed on Ben Bywater making a recovery and capable of being able to play this fall. I can say this, his shoulder has been a concern for BYU. Kalani Sitake acknowledged it during Big 12 media days. I am hoping that Ben is capable of playing because he is the heart and soul of this defense. You can see the passion he plays the game with. And if he's not available, well, I think that could end up where you juggle this a little bit where Harrison Taggart, I'm projecting as the backup middle linebacker. I actually could see Siale Esera slotting inside if Ben Bywater is incapable of being able to play. But keep an eye on it. It's a kind of a fluid situation. He's kind of the biggest question mark for BYU going into this fall camp period is Ben Bywater's health. And then on the weak side, the pass rusher type role, I'm projecting Jack Kelly, the transfer from Weber State, to be BYU starting weak side linebacker. But then Isaiah Glasker and Ace Kafusi, I think, are also capable bodies of contributing there as well. I think the linebacking core, kind of like the wide receivers last year, are going to be BYU's deepest and most talented position on the field on this side of the ball, speaking of defense, whereas the wide receivers are that for offense. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of talent. Now, can it come to the forefront and can it really shine through? Because last year we thought that they had that depth and it really never did. Beyond the frontline guys show that they had the depth. I'm hopeful with a year's worth of development, working in the weight room, working with Jay Hill and understanding this defense at a deeper level, that all those linebackers can contribute at a deeper level and would obviously benefit BYU if they can do that. Now, final thing is on the defensive secondary side of things. I think it's very clear that Jacob Robinson is going to be BYU's a star at cornerback. He has got all the capability of being, I think, an all-conference performer should he add more consistency to his play. I think he starts at one corner spot. I believe that Mark Collins, the transfer from Weber State, like Jack Kelly, will get the start opposite of him. So many of you probably have heard this. If you have not, Mark Collins was projected to start ahead of both Eddie Heckard and Camden Garrett during their time at Weber State together. Those two guys were very, very good football players for BYU last year. And if Mark Collins is better than both of them, that's a home run for BYU to have opposite of Jacob Robinson at cornerback. Their backups, I'm projecting Maury Bamba or Trey Alexander to be behind Robinson, and then Marcus McKenzie behind Mark Collins. Now, McKenzie has been dealing with an injury concern of his own. The fingers crossed that he is full go once training camp begins, because any of you who saw what he was capable of contributing in special teams alone, you know that he's very fleet of foot. He's very fluid as an athlete. And the nice part is if he can contribute on defense, that only adds to his impact potential for BYU. At safety, I have got Tanner Wall and Talon Alfrey as BYU starting safeties. I don't think that those are going to be very popular picks because you have guys like Tommy Prasis and Raider DeMooney, who I'm projecting as the backups in this mix, that are going to have Cougar fans saying, Jake, what are you thinking here? But I'm telling you, when Alfrey and Wall were on the field last season, and remember, they went 8 guys deep last year due to the injuries at the safety position. Those two guys, I think, were two of the best, if not the best, when they were on the field for the Cougars. But just how it went last season, there was an injury. It felt like every other day with that safety group. So I am projecting Tanner Wall to start at free safety and Talon Alfrey to start at strong safety. But expect some rotation there. I think the fact that they found as much depth as they found at safety will contribute to guys having an opportunity to contribute. And that probably brings me to my final point. Some of you are probably saying, well, where's Michael Harper, Jake? Micah Harper is going to reprise the nickel role that Eddie Heckard moved into last year in this defense. It's a critical role in this defense, and it requires a guy who is capable of playing like a safety, but also has corner cover skills. Remember, Eddie Heckard was built like a brick house, and I absolutely loved the way he played the game, and he was very good at that nickel role. I think that Micah Harper is going to move into that role and he's going to thrive there. Micah, remember, when he was a true freshman at BYU way back in 2020, was a corner and came in, was very, very good before tearing his ACL. Then he moved to safety and contributed in a meaningful way there before getting injured once again. I think that this nickel role is tailor-made for what a guy like Micah Harper can offer. And then I'm going to have Crew Wakely, who is also going to be able to contribute at safety as his backup at nickel. Like I said, that safety group, the 6 guys I listed, Tanner Wall, Tommy Prassis, Talon Alfrey, Raider DeMooney, Micah Harper, Crew Wakely, all of them, I think, will get opportunities this season, but that's just how I see things going this fall. And ultimately, I will see if I'm right come week 1 when that depth chart drops for BYU, but that's what I'm projecting. I welcome your guys' feedback. Call me a fool, call me what you will, but that's where I think things stand for the Cougars right now as we approach the start of training camp coming up next week. It's crazy to think it's that close, by the way, but I'm very excited. Now, I've mentioned to you guys that I'm headed out on vacation for the rest of the week, so we'll have a special crossover edition with Locked On Utes tomorrow, talking a little bit about the BYU-Utah rivalry, and then we'll have some shorter form podcasts. They're going to be mainly in video format of interviews I've done over the summer with various guys, guys like Kalani Sitake, who we had on the podcast last week. We've had Cody Epps. I've got some conversations with both quarterbacks, speaking of Jake Retzlaff, as well as Gerry Bohanon. They're not seeing the light of day quite yet. We'll get to those. So it's going to be a busy week, but just be aware that anything that breaks, because you guys that are longtime listeners know when I go on vacation, it seems like things seem to happen. Anything that happens news-wise, we'll catch back up on next Monday. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on the projections. And hopefully, Taylor, you and the rest of Cougar Nation can enjoy my projections or think I'm a complete fool. Either way, I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and kind of go through that exercise. It's actually a really fun thing to do. I don't do it often enough, it feels like, at times here on the show. But we will finish up today's podcast by looking at an event that kicks off later this week. That is the Paris Olympics. There are 9 former BYU Cougars contributing and competing, I should say, out there in Paris. Who are they? What are they competing in? Where can you find them? We'll get into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen and or view of the day. If you have not done so already, please join our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. If you want to have communication with me this week, that's the way it's probably going to happen is via our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. If I catch wind of anything, I'll just be sure to send some texts out. But that's the way to get intel, and you can have one-on-one conversations with myself. I'll be sitting by the lake a lot, so if you want to have a chat with me, join a Locked On Cougars Insider Group, 14-day free trial, $5 a month, and it helps support the show and also gets you that insider access that you cannot find anywhere else. So please join us today. All right, before we go on today's show, just a quick note on where you can find BYU athletes going into this weekend. Now, the Paris Olympic Games begin later this week, and I'm looking forward to this. I always enjoy the Olympics. I know there are people out there that are like, what do the Olympics really mean? But it's fun when there are BYU Cougars contributing and competing at an elite level. And we've got 9 of them, count them, 9 of them this summer competing out there in Paris. So let's run down who's going to be competing. In the 3,000-meter steeplechase, we have the feel-good story of James Corrigan, who is the only current BYU athlete, by the way. He is actually still at Brigham Young University. He's a sophomore who made the 3,000-meter steeplechase field alongside BYU sensation or former star Kenneth Rooks. They will be competing in that 3,000-meter steeplechase once again. I'm looking forward to seeing both of them have their opportunity on the international stage. I think Kenneth Rooks is the more likely to make the final, but we'll see what happens with that. Then there is the great Jimmer Fredette competing in Team USA 3x3 basketball. Really, really fun format. If you've not watched 3-on-3 basketball, it's the debut of this in the Olympic Games. Jimmer and Team USA have got a capability of medaling at minimum. If they don't medal, that'll be a major upset. If they don't win the gold, that's a little more of a dicey proposition, but there is a great chance that Jimmer could be having gold hung around his neck come the end of this Olympic Games. I want it to happen. Jimmer would cap off, I think, would be an absolutely illustrious career. I don't know what's next for him, broadcasting, coaching, whatever it might be. But if he can win a gold in this event at the Paris Games, be the first ever gold medalist in 3x3 basketball, be a pretty cool way to cap off what has been a pretty crazy career. And who knows what the rest of his career holds, but it's just something to keep an eye on. We have 3 former Cougars competing in the marathon, which I'll tell you this much. I can promise you guys, I'm never going to run a marathon in my life. I have got zero desire to run more than, say, 5 miles. To run 26.2 miles and do it in like 2 hours time, yeah, that just ain't me. But nonetheless, Rory Linkletter, Connor Mance, as well as Clayton Young. Excuse me, I screwed up overlooking that. Those 3 will be competing in the marathon. Now, the aforementioned Rory Linkletter is doing it for Team Canada. The other 2 are doing it for Team USA. Rory is the only non-Team USA athlete represented in this field. He's doing it for Canada, where he was born up there in Calgary. But cool to see 3 former Cougars getting their opportunity in that event. And then you're also going to have Whitney Orton Morgan competing in the 5,000 meters on the women's side of things, whereas Courtney Wayment, she is competing in the 3,000 meter steeplechase. So best of luck to both of them on the women's side of things. And the final thing, and this one steps outside of the track and field vein we've been in for quite a bit here. You have Stephanie Rovetti. She's a former BYU women's basketball player who actually took up rugby at the age of 24. She is playing for Team USA's Rugby 7 squad, so she will be participating in pool play beginning July 28th against Japan, Brazil, and France as they try to advance out of their group in Rugby 7s. Any of you who have paid attention to Rugby 7s is a much faster paced style than 15-a-side Rugby Union, as they call it. So that's where you can find those 9 Cougars competing in the various events. If you want a full breakdown of that, I think my friend Mitch Harper did a really, really cool look at where all the preliminaries and final events for all these different athletes are going to be competing at. You can go to kslsports.com and get the link there. I'll probably link it in the show notes as well for you guys. All right. That was a lot. There was a lot of talking, a lot of names, a lot of news, but big thank you as always for you guys' support of the podcast. Cannot wait to be back with you guys live, as I like to call it, coming up next Monday. But enjoy the week. Like I said, we got a lot of content coming your way, so enjoy it. Comment on it, rate, review. Tell us what you like about the show. Tell us what you don't like about the show, and share with your family and friends. Put it on that message board you happen to frequent. Get the word out, because it's come next week. It is on, folks. It is football season come July 29th in my world, and we will have plenty of coverage in the days and months to come. There's nothing like it, and there's nothing like what we do here with a daily podcast. So be with us and share it once again with your family and friends. And as always, thank you for making it your first listen and or view of the day. And obviously, a big thank you to all of you who are everydayers as well, right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.